You know what time it is? It's time for the State of the Fish Tank address. So, things have happened since I've had the last State of the Fish Tank address, although not too much, but there are definitely some changes. So, let's start out with the Neos. The Dream Blues are breeding good. I've got a bunch of little skadoodles skadoodling around, and I got new hatchlings, young ones, and breeding adults in here, all doing their thing. It's a good little tank. It's just going to take some time to really get the population density back up before I start selling these guys again. Moving over to the Bloody Marys. These guys have been doing super good. I think my culling efforts in removing as many of the not so brilliantly colored ones for the last few months has really started to pay off, because most of these shrimp look fan-freaking-tastic. I also have pretty much the same kind of mixture. I've got little itty-bitty babies. That little dude right there. 2 full-size breeding adults. So these guys also were pretty low in numbers for a while. I was losing a few of these guys a day. Well, maybe like one a day for like a week or two, and I was trying to figure out that issue. Long story short, I turned the heater down by like 3 degrees Fahrenheit. Haven't had a death since. So the thing about shrimp is, if you have the heater too low, they'll freeze and they will also stop breeding. The warmer the water is, the faster the metabolism is, the faster that they grow because of that, because they're eating more, they're eating faster. But they're also going to molt a lot more as well. And molting is very stressful on a shrimp. So because you're kind of forcing them to grow up faster, they essentially get stuck in their exoskeleton because it's happening too fast, and that can cause them to die. It's not outright heat stress, it's just you're causing them to grow faster than they can sustain themselves with. So, lowering the temperature, it's 73 degrees Fahrenheit. In this tank it was like 75, but ever since I turned it down, not a single death, and the population's been growing pretty steady. I'll probably have enough of these guys to start selling again in a few months once I get a bunch of them at full adult size. Over here is a newish tank. So this tank used to be the neon yellow tank, but when it came time to put new shrimp in here, because my neon yellows were basically a holdover from the big catastrophe a few years back, and I was just letting those shrimp live out their life in the tank. They've since moved upstairs to a sanctuary tank, and I had this tank empty, pretty much not doing anything, and I figured, well, you know, the only color of Neo that I really haven't had is jade green. So that's what these little guys are, and holy cow, there's a bunch of them. I had a little shrimp explosion in this tank, and if you look back there, I got a bunch of mama shrimps too. The shrimp explosion is still sploding. Now, jade green is a particularly weird color because, man, their genetics need to be just right. Otherwise, they really do just look kind of black. So, when I first got them, this tank was black substrate, but, oh, I could not see them at all. They just basically blended into the background, and I couldn't keep track of them. So I said, well, that's no good. I have some leftover pool filter sand. I swapped it out with pool filter sand, and now I can actually see them. Some of these guys have a lighter green hue than others. Granted, these are still very young shrimp. Their full color won't come in until they're almost breeding age. So the reality with these guys is I'm probably going to need to cull them a lot until I can get a stabilized genetic line for consistent color. There are some that are just absolutely gorgeous, like a deep, vibrant green hue. Although that doesn't come across very easily, even on this white substrate. This one is probably one of the better ones, but it is on a piece of driftwood. And that's actually why I added this driftwood in here. I got to thinking, well, what colors are really going to contrast well with green? And the only colors I can think of are red and brown. There are other colors, but now you're starting to get into that kind of funky, definitely not realistic, or not natural, I should say, kind of color scheme. And I didn't really want to do that. I suspect once I have a stable genetic line with a color variation that I particularly like, I can switch back to black sand and probably be perfectly fine. Now, there is that old myth that white sand will cause the shrimp to be less deeply colored in their hue. You know, light sand makes light shrimp sort of thing. But I actually don't know how much I believe that, because, you know, I've been doing this for years now, and I really think it just comes down to the genetics. Yes, there are some color cells in some shrimps that can be adjusted by the shrimp, but typically once they reach a certain age, they stabilize at the color they're going to be for the rest of their life. That transparent or translucent capability tends to only be seen, in my experience, in young shrimp, and that's really more of a defense mechanism from predators. So once they're adults, they don't seem to do that nearly as much. Now, let's talk about the pumpkin orange tank. These guys are doing good like always. I've always got a ton of pumpkin orange. I'm sorry, these aren't even pumpkin orange. These are sun-kissed orange, to be specific. These little skadoodles are doing fine. There's plenty of buried mamas in here. There's a bunch of little babies in here. There's a buried mama. You know, the orange ones don't sell as well as the other colors, but I like to have variety. I think variety is the spice of life, and if I'm going to have a bunch of little shrimps, I might as well have a bunch of colors. So, I love these guys. They're always plentiful in numbers. They're always very colorful and very skadoodly. You know, they scuttle about to and fro, up and down the tank. So, you know, they definitely come out in hordes when you put a little pellet of food in there, which I've been doing more and more ever since the summer began. So I also started doing some of the other shrimps. So some of you may know the crystal red experiment that I've been running for like a year now. So maybe it was the last State of the Fish Tank address, but about a year ago, we had a major power outage in my state, and we lost power for 5 days, and I lost pretty much all my crystal reds because of that, including all my buried females. And they were doing perfectly fine for several months in just straight well water and inert sand. And I still fully believe that it is possible, because I've seen it. I've heard reports from other breeders that can do it, but the idea for right now is this is RODI water mixed with salty shrimp GH and fluval stratum. This is the proper setup for these shrimps, the one that is very commonly recommended. The idea is I'm going to breed a bunch of these little guys and continue the experiments using my own stock. That way I don't gotta sort of gamble on things going perfectly. So that's something that I still am doing. It's just a bit of a process. Little Jafari here is doing okay. Could stand to have his tank cleaned from algae a little bit. I plan on moving Jafari out sometime. I'm going to be giving him to a friend, hopefully, and with any luck, we'll get him a bigger tank and some tank mates, because the little guy is... Oh, he's a goldfish. He really should be in a pond, you know? But he's a good little fish. He never bothered nobody. Over here, I've got Sulawashi Shrimp. So these guys have always been a favorite shrimp of mine. I've got 10 of them, but they are still very, very shy. So they like to kind of keep to themselves. If they see a human come into frame, they will hide. This is RODI water mixed with salty shrimp for Sulawashi Shrimp. So I plan on keeping them in that special blend of water because they are very expensive shrimp, and because they are very much endangered in real life. I do not want to do anything to minimize their population in the world. My goal with them is more philanthropic than business oriented. I really just want to keep their species alive and existing. Over here I've got the Snails, my little wabbit snails. They're doing okay. They like to nom on the noms. I'm probably going to be phasing out production of rabbit snails. I do really like rabbit snails, and I think every shrimp tank should have a rabbit snail, which is why I've got a rabbit snail in every single one of these tanks. Snail poo has some good stuff in it for shrimp, believe it or not. So that's why I keep rabbit snails in there. They're my favorite snails by far. They are goofy, fun, and big, and I mean they're fun. They don't breed like crazy either. Now over here, big things are coming, but not quite sure yet how I'm going to get it in the room. Long story short, I have plans for an enormous tank, and I'll have to just show you one day where I'm getting the fish. Should be cool. But anywho, that is the state of the fish tank address. That fish tank has nothing in it. It's a standby tank at the moment. But that's pretty much it, guys. Things are going nicely, but as with anything involving aquariums, it takes time.